Faith comes by hearing the Word of God. Join us each week as Pastor Steve shares God's Word as it relates to current events and events to come. Now here's your host, Pastor Steve Cioccolanti.
Imagine if there were no authority higher than the government. Imagine that. What kind of society would we live in? The politician's opinion of the day sets the law of the day. What a scary society that would be. But if God sets the authority and the laws, then only a biblically literate people would know if the government has violated God's laws. And then, therefore, they would be free to disobey evil authority. And we find this is exactly what happened in the case of Daniel and the 3 Hebrew children. They call them 3 Hebrew children. They were probably, old. The 3 Hebrew children. When they said, no, the law of the land, the law of the time says, everyone must bow down to this golden statue. These 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, said, no, we won't do it. And the punishment was capital punishment. And these young people stood up against wicked law because they were Bible literate people. And they were thrown in the furnace of fire, and they survived it. And when they come back out, their resistance to evil convinced the king that this is the true and the living God. How many young people are there in Australia listening to me who would do that today? It would be a rare thing today. It would be highly uncommon that any young person would take such a stance. In fact, they would even be mistaught. Romans 13 says, well, all authority is from God, you have to obey everything. No, there's a purpose to the authority, which is to reward good and punish evil. And when the authority punishes good and rewards evil, we must resist. And in resisting, we would end up convincing some of these politicians, you're not the highest authority in my book, in my faith, in my church. You're not. You'd like to think you are, but you're not. And you can do whatever you want, but I will not submit to wicked authority that rewards evil and punishes good. And that's what happened in America. Finally, they had to have a separation from Britain. And they listed in the Declaration of Independence why they had to resist wicked authority, just like Daniel did. And Daniel was another case where the law suddenly was passed. You can't pray to anyone except to Nebuchadnezzar. So Daniel went and, resisting the civil law of the day, opened the window, bowed down, and worshiped God 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. Just like his habit was. And the opponents of Daniel, the people who hated him, said, gotcha. We got you. We knew you'd do it. We knew you'd pray. We knew you would disobey wicked law because you're a righteous person. It's a requirement for righteous people to be Bible literate. How would you even know which law is good or not good? So many Christians don't even know anymore. It starts with a knowledge of God's divine law. Otherwise, the whole society crumbles. This is a principle of good government. You can't improve upon God. God is the best. Why? At the beginning, in the Garden of Eden, how many laws did God make? To rule the universe, to rule all of creation. God says, I'm going to make one law. One law. That's it. Don't touch this tree. It's my tree. In other words, the whole universe is yours. Everything else is yours. You know what that's like today? That's like if Australia said, as of tomorrow, there is no more taxes, no more rules, no more regulations. Nothing. There's no more rules. You're free to be Aussie, mate. Whatever you want to do, you're free. Oh, except one thing. You can't climb over the Prime Minister's fence and steal his stuff. Such a people should be so grateful, should rejoice that there's only one law. And you know what Satan convinced such a people to do? To climb over the fence and harass the good leader. Harass him and abuse him and despise him. And people say, why should God punish? Are you kidding? This was the best government ever conceived on ever. And we thumbed our nose at him. We sneered at him. and said, the only law that you made, we will break. Unbelievable. And now we live under systems where there's so many thousands of laws that we can't make heads or tails of it. We pay lawyers thousands of dollars, and most of the time the lawyers don't know what the judge will say. How unjust is that system? Where the experts of the laws don't even know the outcome of the trial. It's that unpredictable. And people say, oh, that's great. Our system, our nation is great, but God is so bad. Are you kidding? You misunderstand something about the Bible. Maybe you go back and read the first page. God's law was so good, but they didn't like it. So God says, all right, let me increase it. After the time of Noah, this is recorded in the Jewish history. After the time of Noah, God said, I give the entire earth that was saved by the deluge, the flood, 7 laws. The technical term is called 7 Noahide laws. 7 laws of Noah. They're very simple, a little bit different from the 10 Commandments, but almost the same. Only 2 are very different. Don't worship idols, don't curse God. Establish courts of justice. Number 3, establish courts of justice. Do not commit murder, do not commit adultery or any sexual immorality, don't steal. 7th law, don't eat flesh torn from a living animal. Pretty gross. So only 2 laws were different. But the 3rd law says, establish courts of justice, otherwise do anything else you like. Don't break any of these 7 laws, otherwise you're free to do anything you like. Wow, I think pretty good second attempt. This was pretty good. Pretty good. But sure enough, they started disobeying that. The world has strayed so far from this simplicity of God's law, so far. Now we have state persecution of religion. We have someone like Lauren Southern come to our nation, and she's told in our nation there is a no-go zone where she's not allowed to even walk there or talk about Islam. Are you kidding me? In this nation, there's a no-go zone? The state itself now has turned against the freedom of the majority of people. The majority of this nation remains Christian. We have political witch hunts going on where the intelligence agency of America is trying to dig dirt and give immunity to people who can dig dirt on the President of the United States. We have judicial activism, where people who were not elected to make laws are passing judgments that in effect create new laws on transgender bathrooms, on the rights of children, of what they're going to, and the rights of parents, on what the children should or should not be hearing in school. We have gender confusion. We have pedophilia at the highest levels of government. We have courts of injustice where people go and end up, instead of finding peace, they find confusion and injustice. We've strayed so far because we've got unending laws, confusion of laws, misinterpretation, difficult to understand, contradictory laws. Every politician comes up and promises to make laws, and we are gullible enough to say, yay, because it sounds like the law I want. Great. What we should say is, you're not God. You're not qualified to make laws. We already got a system of perfect laws. We have a template for perfect laws. It's worked very well. And what we want you to do is as little as possible to disturb our peace and our freedom and our right to just transact with each other. We can choose to transact with each other in a voluntary, free way. Those are the core biblical principles that created Western civilization. Well, that didn't work. 7 laws didn't work. So God said, all right, I'll up it to 10. Since you like laws so much, you didn't like 1 law, not happy with that. You didn't like 7 laws, let's go with 10. And they broke that as well. You know the story. They broke that as well. So sad. I'd love to live under 10 laws. Let me tell you, if I could find a country in which there were 10 laws and no more, I'm there. I like Australia a lot, but if there's a country with 10 laws, I'm out of here. That's a great nation. But they stuffed it up. They stuffed it up. The first principle of making good government, based on God's perfect rulership, is to have very few laws, to make them limited, and to make them predictable. The more laws you make, the less prosperous your country will be. When laws are unpredictable, there will always be poverty. This happens in Venezuela, in Angola, in North Korea. When you don't know what the law might be when you wake up the next day, you don't know what the interest rate will be if you wake up the next month, you've got poverty. Businesses would not be sure whether to invest, whether laws will change, interest rates will change, taxes will change, tariffs will change. And always remember this, people, laws take away freedom. Laws take away your freedom and add power to the politicians. All laws have that effect because government is the only institution that can force you to do what it wants at the point of a gun. All laws do that, so we want a minimum of laws, and we want to discover what are good laws. The only way we can do that is to be Bible literate. James Madison said this in the Federalist paper, number 62. The facility is an old English word for ease, okay? Like French, facile. Facile means ease. The facility and excess of lawmaking seem to be the diseases to which our governments are most liable. Can you imagine that? That's written 250 years ago. It said, all these politicians love making too many laws. Man cannot create laws. You know that man cannot create laws? It's a farce that politicians can come and make laws. It's kind of like a scientist saying, you know what, we want to make a law that on Wednesday gravity won't work. Is that ridiculous? You're not a scientist. You're a buffoon. Scientists cannot make laws. They must discover the laws. But do you know that was common knowledge 250 years ago, that politicians do not have the power to create laws? That's why they studied the Bible so hard to discover what are righteous laws. They only discover them, and they don't go anymore. And the Jews really understood that. That's why when Jesus came along on one day in John chapter 13, he says, a new commandment I give unto you. Everybody's ears perked up. What do you mean? What do you mean a new commandment? We haven't had a new commandment since Moses. Do you understand that? There were no new laws since Moses died. And Jesus walks up and says, yeah, you haven't had any new commandments for a while. I'm making one up. Well, who are you? He's saying, just by that statement alone, if you understand the history of Judaism, by that one statement alone, you would know Jesus is God in the flesh. Because no prophet dares to speak that way. No religious teacher dares. Not even politicians from 200 years ago dare to speak that way. No one would run on a campaign that says, I make up stuff. Vote for me, I make up stuff. People are like, no, you're an idiot. We would be afraid to have you in power. We'd be afraid to give power to you. Nobody makes up new laws. You only discover laws. It is so basic. This is called Bible literacy. And the anti-God, antichrist, often left-wing people have attacked the very foundation of justice, peace, and prosperity.